Hello, my name is Al Getz with Charting the Territories, and this is your event center for Georgia Championship Wrestling, where we look at 1 week in 1971 and take a look at all the house show records we have, and then use a little bit of data magic to try and figure out how many cards we might be missing. Be sure to visit www.chartingtheterritories.com for more about a year in the life of Georgia Championship Wrestling in 1971. But let's go to the event center. The week we're selecting is the week beginning Monday, August 30th, 1971, and ending on Sunday, September 5th. And we have a total of 9 house shows in our records. On Monday, August 30th, they ran Waycross, Georgia. Tuesday, they ran Macon and Savannah. Wednesday, Cartersville, Columbus, and Perry. Thursday, Albany. Friday, Atlanta, and Saturday in Griffin, Georgia. So now let's go day by day, show by show. On Monday in Waycross, the main event was a tag team match with Flash Monroe and Billy Spears against Bill Dromo and Roberto Soto. Also on the card, advertised as Cisco Grimaldo versus Jose Lothario, though in actuality it was Salvador Lothario and not Jose. Mr. X, who in this territory at this time was a wrestler named Doug Scoggins, versus Jack Johnson, and Jerry Oates versus Ken Russell. On Tuesday, August 31st, in Macon, Georgia, the main event was Buddy Colt versus Bob Armstrong, with manager Homer Odell, who was Buddy Colt's manager, handcuffed to Leon Ogle during the match. Also on the card, Flash Monroe versus Dickie Steinborn, and Big Bill White versus Big Bill Dromo. That's 2 Big Bills. And Guillotine Gordon and Cisco Grimaldo versus Roberto Soto and Salvador Lothario, plus Jack Johnson versus Jerry Oates. Also on Tuesday, but this time in Savannah, Big John versus El Mongol was the main event. Also on the card was a battle royal with the Assassins, Mr. X, Klondike Bill, Ken Russell, George Scott, Kubla Khan, and Alex Medina. There almost certainly were additional matches featuring the wrestlers that were in the Battle Royal in separate singles bouts. On Wednesday, September 1st, the first of 3 cards we have in our records in Cartersville, Georgia at the Sports Palace, Flash Monroe versus George Scott, Salvador Lothario versus Ken Russell, Bob Clay versus The Medic, and Mr. X versus Alex Medina. Also on Wednesday in Columbus, the main event was a no time limit, 1 fall to a finish match with Big John versus El Mongol, a Southeastern tag team title match with the Assassins against Bill Dromo and Bob Armstrong, with the disqualification rule waived. Also on the card, Bill White versus Klondike Bill, and Guillotine Gordon and Cisco Grimaldo versus Jerry Oates and Kubla Khan. The third show on Wednesday, September 1st in our records is in Perry, Georgia, with a 6-man tag as the main event, where Buddy Colt, Billy Spears, and manager Homer Odell step into the ring to face Dickie Steinborn, Roberto Soto, and Choo Choo Lin. Also on the card, Darling Dagmar versus Diamond Lil, plus 2 singles matches featuring wrestlers that were in the 6-man main event, as Colt took on Steinborn and Spears took on Soto. On Thursday, September 2nd in Albany, Georgia, Bill Dromo, according to this ad, is doing double duty as he's in a challenge match against Big John and also in a tag team match teaming up with Bob Armstrong to face Flash Monroe and Buddy Colt. Also on the card, Darling Dagmar versus Diamond Lil and Mr. X versus Jerry Oates. On September 3rd in Atlanta at the City Auditorium, a triple main event as Ray Gunkel faced Big John, Georgia heavyweight title match between Buddy Colt and George Scott, and a Georgia tag team title match with the Assassins facing El Mongol and Kubla Khan. Now also on this card were the following matches: Dick Steinborn versus Flash Monroe, Bill Dromo and Klondike Bill versus Guillotine Gordon and Ken Russell, Bill White versus Roberto Soto, and Alex Medina versus Cisco Grimaldo. And finally, on Saturday, September 4th in Griffin, Georgia, at the newly air-conditioned Sports Palace, main event was a Georgia tag team title match with the Assassins taking on Klondike Bill and Dick Steinborn. Also a special lights out challenge match, Big John versus El Mongol, Cisco Grimaldo versus Jerry Oates, Darling Dagmar versus Diamond Lil, and Ken Russell versus Alex Medina. So that completes our look at the 9 house shows we have records for this week in Georgia Championship Wrestling in 1971. Now, let's take a look and see if we can figure out how many cards we might be missing. So here's a spreadsheet I put together showing all the wrestlers who were regulars in the territory. Baby faces are on the left, heels are on the right. They're also listed in descending order by their spot rating. So you can see who the main eventers, upper mid-carders, and preliminary wrestlers were. The part-time wrestlers who just worked once or twice this week are listed underneath the regulars. And then the special attractions, Darling Dagmar and Diamond Lil, are listed at the very bottom. And on this particular week, I strongly believe that Dagmar and Lil were not in the area on Monday and Tuesday, that they showed up on Wednesday and worked through the end of the week. Also, you may have noticed we don't have any records for shows on Sundays. In this territory at this time, it appears they did not run on Sundays, which is often the case, particularly in the southern United States in this era, as the so-called blue laws prohibited public gatherings or businesses, from holding events on Sundays. So it was a nice built-in day off for the crew as well. But now let's look at Monday, the 30th. You can see all the wrestlers who were booked on that one card in Waycross have the letters WAY in that column on the spreadsheet. So right off the bat, we can see there are definitely enough wrestlers who are not booked in Waycross to have at least one other card. And really, if you look at the number of wrestlers available, it is possible that they ran 2 cards in 2 small towns. I believe there's 6 available heels: Big John, Buddy Colt, both Assassins, Guillotine Gordon, and Bill White. And on the babyfaces side, we have 7 babyfaces available: El Mongol, Bob Armstrong, George Scott, Dick Steinborn, Klondike Bill, Kubla Khan, and Alex Medina. So that's a pretty large crew. So they would have needed to run in a larger city. And really the only large city in Georgia that we don't have records for at this time would have been Augusta. And I don't know for a fact that they were running Augusta at this point in time. So it's possible they had one big card in a city like Augusta, or they had 2 smaller cards in smaller towns. On Tuesday, August 31st, you can see pretty much the entire crew is booked. Fortunately, lucky Billy Spears has a day off, as he is the only wrestler on the regular roster not booked, so good for him. And on Wednesday, the entire crew is booked up. So once again, no additional cards were possible. Now, Thursday, September 2nd, where we have a card in Albany. Once again, there are definitely enough wrestlers for at least one show, and very possibly 2 cards as well. Again, looking at who is unbooked on the as far as the main eventers or upper mid-carders go, you have the Assassins available. You also have Spears, Guillotine Gordon, and a few other wrestlers lower on the cards. And on the babyface side, you have El Mongol, George Scott, Steinborn, Klondike Bill, Kubla Khan, and others. So this could have been 1 normal size card or 2 small cards. On Friday, September 3rd, despite Atlanta being the largest city in the territory, and it typically being their largest house show of the week, there are enough wrestlers unbooked for there to have been another small card. And in particular, noting that Darling Dagmar and Diamond Lil were not booked in Atlanta. When the special attractions came in, they almost always worked every single night of their stay here. And in this case, I also checked to make sure Dagmar and Lil weren't booked somewhere else, perhaps Florida or St. Louis, where they, flew out and then came back in to work the following night. That's not the case. So they're available to work a card on Friday, as are Bob Armstrong and Billy Spears, as well as preliminary wrestlers Mr. X, Jerry Oates, and mid-carder Salvador Lothario. So there could have been a card with Armstrong versus Spears, Dagmar versus Lil, and Mr. X against either Lothario or Oates, or perhaps in a handicap match against both men. On Saturday, September 4th, again, enough wrestlers unbooked for there to have been at least 1 card. And again, a small possibility that it would have been 2 smaller cards. Although looking at the number of wrestlers that were booked in Griffin, I believe there were a total of 12 wrestlers, including Dagmar and Lil. The fact that there are about 12 wrestlers unbooked makes it more likely that we're just missing 1 card on Saturday. So we have records for 9 cards in Georgia Championship Wrestling this week in 1971. And as best we can tell, there are somewhere between 4 and 7 other cards possible. So that means our records are somewhere between 55 and 70% complete for this particular week, which just goes to show you that despite the best attempts of wrestling historians such as myself and all those who preceded me, we still are missing a significant amount of house show records. But fortunately, we're able to look at what we have and figure out what we're missing, but also get a good feel for what the territory was looking like at the time. If you want more information on Georgia Championship Wrestling in 1971, be sure to check out chartingtheterritories.com for our A Year in the Life series. And you can also check out our monthly podcast, also called Charting the Territories, featuring myself and John Boucher. And you can find the Charting the Territories podcast wherever you get your favorite wrestling podcasts, or heck, any podcast at all. For Charting the Territories, this is Al Getz. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next month at Charting the Territories.